I want to welcome you to Dream Chasers Radio with me, your host, Yaya Diamond. What's up, peoples? How you doing? It is a great day, and I'm so excited. Yo, I am so excited. This is the reason I'm excited. You guys know I love natural stuff, natural medications. I'm very, very sensitive to medications. I mean, the stuff that they give me sometimes 9 out of 10 times, I'm allergic to it. And so I really gravitate towards natural path, homeopathic things and things like that because it works for me. And my next guest is amazing. He lives on like acreage and he's natural and I can hear his chicks in the background. It's so cute. I want to welcome Spencer to the show. Welcome, Mr. Feldman. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being on the show. Okay, so first of all, how did you get involved with, the natural way of healing and being so, I mean, you said you lived in New York and now you live like on how many acres?
Yeah, I'm on 100 acres surrounded by 1,000. We, grow your own food and just off grid. I'm about as opposite of an experience from a New York City boy as you could imagine.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So how did that happen?
Well, I grew up in New York City and, when I wanted a little peace and quiet, I'd go up to the rooftop. But even from the rooftop, as far as you can see, it's gray buildings and dirty air. And, the lullaby at night is ambulances and police cars and screeching tires and things like that. And then I remember one time as a kid, I spent a year on a farm when I was 7. And I remember flying out of New York City and looking out the window, yeah, and I remember seeing green. And I said, wow, wait a minute. The entire world is not a city. What is this stuff? There are things, people growing things and and then a year on a farm, it was great. Growing crops and being with animals and picking ticks off of you, whatever. So, and I remember picking wild scallions and munching on them as I'd walk down the trails. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, I love doing stuff like that. I like those little, not to get off the subject, but you know how those little bushes and they have these little cute little fruits that look like pumpkins. What are those called? Cherry something or another.
Gosh, well, there's so many things that
So
depending on
good.
where you are located,
Yeah.
you can just pick off and just start. I remember in college, a friend of mine pointed out an apple tree by one of the buildings. Oh, he had an apple in his hand. I'm like, well, where'd you get that apple? And he said, there's an apple tree on campus. I'm like, no, there isn't. And he showed it to me, and it was right next to like one of the buildings, and everybody walked by, and nobody saw that it was an apple tree.
Oh
I
my
didn't see
God.
it. And then so we climbed up and we had some apples. It was just
That's
like
so
not
good.
part of my world to think that could be there. And so since I didn't think it could be there, I couldn't see it.
Mm,
So
wow.
anyway, you asked how I got into
Yes.
sort of medicine, right? So back at that same college, there was an outbreak, or there was supposedly an outbreak. One person had it theoretically of mumps. And
Mm.
so they said, okay, you guys can either all line up for a vaccine or take 2 weeks off and not go to classes. And I didn't know any better. I was like, sure, I'll take the vaccine. And the nurse injected me. And I must have gotten an injection from the bottom of the vial where all the mercury preservative had fallen down. Because after that injection, I didn't understand then, but after that injection, I remember trying to drink soup and the soup would shake out of my spoon before it got to my mouth. So, I go to my doctor and I said, hey, God, what's going on? I can't drink soup. My hands are shaking. I'm a mess. And he goes, okay, well, I've got a drug for you. I'm like, okay, but I'm 19 years old. I shouldn't have Parkinson's. Can you explain to me what's going on? And he said, look, kid, I haven't got time to explain this to you. You're not a doctor and that's not my job. Here's the drug. I said, all right, well, no, thanks. And so there go my dreams of being an emergency room surgeon, because
Oh my
you're
gosh.
not going to handle a scalpel if your hand is shaking, right?
Mm.
But that God works in mysterious ways. So okay. So that I started thinking, I'm like, wow, that's, what do I have? What is going on? And what I ended up doing is starting to play around with making alternative products for myself, trying to fix myself. And I had a lot of friends who were doctors, because I would go to the conferences and I'd be this young kid who wasn't a doctor showing up at these conferences with physicians. And they're like, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, you're not supposed to be here. You're not a doctor. I'm like, well, I paid my fee and they never asked me if I was a doctor. They just assumed it. That's on them. So, some of these guys took me under their wing, some of these old naturopaths, and kind of explained to me and helped me change my understanding of what the human body was. And they started asking me for some of these things that I was making. So I started realizing, wow, maybe what I need to do is I need to be a manufacturer. And so I started making products. And over the last 25, 30 years, what I do is I'll bump into someone who's got a problem. Someone is put in front of me who hasn't been helped by the traditional systems. And I'll think about it and I'll experiment with it. And if I'm lucky, I come up with something for them and that becomes a product. And then other people with the same issues start showing up. And, it's very odd the way it works. As an example, I do something called EWOD, which is exercise with oxygen therapy. You exercise while you're breathing oxygen. So I was just the other day, I was filling up some oxygen tanks and I'm talking to the woman there and we're chatting and she's saying how she's been married for, 19 years. And I say, oh, that's really great. And then she says, oh, but her husband has Alzheimer's. And I was like, oh, well, I've been working. Sorry, I got to clear my throat here.
It's okay.
Okay, there we go. So her husband has Alzheimer's. And I'm like, oh, well, I've been working on this protocol for Alzheimer's. It turns out that most neurologic problems we now think, the ones that we thought were genetic, we now think have to do with something called protein folding diseases. And that's, let me know if it gets
No,
too
it's okay. Go ahead.
geeky and
The,
nerdy.
the
So,
the plaque in the brain, right? The
right,
plaque.
right,
Right. Okay.
exactly.
Gotcha.
So what
Okay.
happens is, we're always making proteins and we make them one amino acid at a time. So you get this string and then the body folds the proteins with the fat soluble parts on the inside and the water soluble parts on the outside. And you get this little protein and it floats around. If you're exposed to toxic metals or have certain genetic things called lysosome issues, the proteins misfold and the fat soluble part sticks out. And now this protein can't move around. It's not water soluble. It sticks in the body. And that is plaque for Alzheimer's. And
Oh, wow.
so she's talking to me about how she's trying to get this protocol with this special thing. And I'm like, I know what you're talking about. I actually manufacture that. And she's showing me what the other company is doing. And I'm like, well, first off, they're IV, so you're not gonna be able to do it yourself. And secondly, they're using the wrong form of the ingredient for what you're trying to do. And she's like, well, why would they do that? I'm not gonna name the company, but it's called the
They want to
cyclodextrin.
make money.
It's called a cyclodextrin, and they're using something called a beta cyclodextrin, which is a certain size. And I said, okay, but what they need for your husband is the alpha cyclodextrin, is a little smaller. And she goes, well, why? This is a very professional website and doing all these studies. Why aren't they using the right one? And I'm like, well, I think I know which company that is. I'm looking at their data, and they kind of. So there's some problems that happen even in the alternative medical establishment, right? There's profit motive. And if you're in it to help people, then that's the right perspective, right?
Right.
You want to try to fix people. You have to have, that has to be your payment. And then if money comes, fine.
Right.
And what happens in the traditional establishment and the alternative establishment, there's some issues, right? So if somebody has a patent on one thing but not another, they'll try to make the one that they have the patent on work for everything, rather than admit that it is good for some things and not others, and then push people in the
Oh.
right direction.
Mhm.
So another issue is, a lot of companies are making money on disease, right? They'd rather see you continually take a drug rather than actually get in there and fix the problem. So, what were the odds that I would bump into this woman and she would mention her husband has Alzheimer's, and then we would talk about it, and then I'd put her on the right path. So, there's definitely a degree of providence associated with healing, especially when people have stuff that there aren't a lot of protocols or good solutions for.
Mhm.
You're gonna, at a certain point, you're gonna have to rely on God, you're gonna have to rely on your guardian angels, and a lot of hard work and a lot of patience to find something. Because, I would never tell someone there's an incurable condition, but I have seen patients that believe that. and they'll stop searching, they'll stop looking. And, sometimes people, I get people who are usually, because we do consultations, who are usually like 5 to 20 years into their chronic disease. And they've spent thousands of dollars and, gone to a lot of doctors, but they kept with it. And, if you can help them, then great. But if a person gives up, well, then, so that's what that is. So that's how I got into it. And it's
Wow.
played out as this very surreal and synchronistic experience where I'll come up with a product, and then suddenly all of these people that I've never heard of start calling me for it. And I'm like, how did you even know I was working on gadolinium toxicity? And you're presenting with that. So
Wow.
it's kind of magical,
It is. And I want to just, real quick talk, not really talk about, but I just want to name some of the things that you've actually come across that have, you've developed. And this is, to me, this is amazing because, like you said, the person has a problem, you twinkle a little bit, you figure it out, you're very smart on that aspect. And then all of a sudden, boom, here it is. I think that is amazing. And you're doing it because you love people and you want to help people, not on the profit side, but on the humanity side, which I love. I absolutely
So,
love.
thank you.
So,
So, I, I couldn't do this without the internet, right? So the way
mhm.
the process works is, someone will present in front of me with some horrific disease or just something not working for them. And, you have compassion for these people. So you go online and you research it. And what goes on is there's all of this research out there on conditions. The average doctor won't have the time to do that research. You could spend weeks diving into what's called PubMed, going through all the data, and there's all these amazing white hat people out there who are, these great researchers who are out there figuring out, working on little parts of the puzzle, like, okay, we can manipulate histamine like this, and we can shift the immune system like that. And so all you have to do is bring these things together with the understanding that you're probably not going to patent it. And that's the issue. If you can't patent something, a drug company, most companies don't want to work with something that's not patentable, because
Mm.
if it's not patentable, they get competed with. And then if they're going to spend $10 million going in trying to get the FDA to approve a drug, and and they do that, and someone else can copy them, it's not financially, there's no financial incentive. So you need someone who doesn't need to make millions and millions of dollars, and who's not motivated like that to be able to access this. So the first, well, I definitely got something in my throat this morning. So the first thing we ever made, are you familiar with chelation and heavy metals?
Yes, yes, I saw that on your website. And so I'll put the link for Remedylink in the description box below. But yeah, it says Medicardium
Mhm.
heavy metal detox.
Right. So that was the first product I made. And so a really popular protocol, for a number of years was IV chelation. That's, they stick a needle in your arm and they
Mhm.
put a chemical in that'll take the metals out of the body. And that's things like lead, cadmium, aluminum, arsenic, barium, cadmium. And, our bodies have an ability to detoxify. Most of the stuff I make is about detox. And we have an amazing ability to detoxify metals and chemicals, Yaya. The challenge is that we are exposed now in the 21st century, because of technology and the chemical inventions, to metals and chemicals in types and amounts that we never evolved to handle. So you can
Mm.
handle a little bit of arsenic and uranium in your well water. You can handle some toxic chemicals, which historically might be a snake or a spider bite. But there's all of these things being hit at once, and
Wow.
so in a lot of us, we don't have a lot of any. We might not have a lot of any one toxin if we're in decent health. But so what happens is when a chemical comes to market that might be put in your food supply as a preservative, for instance, right, or a pesticide that you might be exposed to on your crops, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, we've tested it on animals for one generation for a few months, and at this level, it's not causing problems. And that's a really bad way to determine whether toxins are going to be a problem for humans. Number one, we're not rats. We react differently. Number two, they're testing it for 1 generation. They need to test it for 3 generations to see if there's birth defects.
Mm.
And number three, they need to test it for the entire length of the animal's life. And number four, what they're not able to test, even if they wanted to, is what that giant soup does. So as an example, let's say they say, okay, you're exposed to glyphosate, which is a really nasty pesticide, but you're only getting X part, let's call it, 10 parts per million, and at that point, it's not causing problems. Well, even if we were to agree with that, but you're also getting exposed to 10 parts per million of arsenic in the chicken feed, but you're also getting exposed to 10 parts per million of mercury from your teeth. And you're also getting exposed to 10 parts per million of formaldehyde coming out of the, and solvents coming out of the carpets. And when you add all that together, that soup is what we're living in. And so that, that's not to say that there aren't some people with some really bad toxic exposures from, where they've worked or where they kind of water they've drunk. It's toxic well water. But even if you live a really decent, clean life, the background we live in is toxic. And so what I tell people is it's a good idea just to clean out your body and think
Yeah.
about, once a year, and like, think of it this way. It's like, they're like, well, should I get tested? I'm like, well, you're going to change the oil in your car, let's say once a year, right? Yeah. Okay. When you go to the dealership to get your oil changed, do you say, excuse me, but before you change my oil, can I spend $300 to have the oil analyzed to see whether it needs to be changed? And they're going to look at you and be like, well, yeah, we could do that, but I can tell you, I've changed the oil on thousands of cars. The oil always needs to be changed at least once a year. And
Right.
isn't it cheaper just to do that than to do a test to find out? So I love having people bring me, tests. I had someone bring me $10,000 worth of tests the other day, and it was great to look through it. And at the end of the day, it came down to, you've got toxic chemicals and metals. Well, now, because of the tests, I happen to know that she was toxic in gadolinium, uranium, and 3 very specific chemicals. But at the end of the day, we could have just done a detox for her.
Exactly.
So typically, the
Mm.
first detox that we did, the one for toxic metals, is usually done by IV. And the reason doctors will do an IV is not because they want to poke you in the arm, but because the ingredient wouldn't survive digestion. And so
Mm.
EDTA, the chelator that pulls out toxic metals, it doesn't really survive digestion very well. So they gave it by IV. Now, I taught myself how to do IVs on my own arm. Not an experience I would suggest to someone else nor recommend. And so I said, well, gosh, this is uncomfortable. So is there another way to do this? And so we make them by suppository. And someone would say, well, that's not something I want to do. And I'm like, yeah, but it takes 15 seconds. Once it's in, you don't notice it. And it's a lot less invasive than an IV. And more importantly, you're empowered to do it for yourself. You don't
Right.
have to go to find someone who does this, pay them hundreds and hundreds of dollars and sit in a chair. You can do it at home. So I'm
Mm.
trying to empower people. So that was the first detox product I ever made.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And you have a few other, a chemical detox, you have liver, gallbladder flush, which is, you know what? Liver and gallbladders. I've seen so many people have their gallbladder removed. I
Mhm.
mean, would this flush it out and help with gallbladder? I mean, how does
Sure.
that work?
So, okay, we can do that. And well, let's do the chemical one, and then we can do the liver gallbladder one.
Hmm.
Okay, so because there was a kind of like an order into how it happened. So,
Okay.
I'm getting phone calls for people or who want to buy the chelation product, and I originally made it for circulation because if you do the right, if you get the right kind of chelator, it can kind of decalcify the calcium that's building up in the arteries, joints, and kidneys and gallstones too. But there's an association with cleaning out metals out of the arteries because the metals cause the arteries to plaque up. And I'll explain. It goes like this. Are you familiar with something called Crisco?
Okay.
Crisco. So basically, if you take cheap oil and you
Mhm.
bubble it nitrogen, hydrogen, and nickel through it, they're both metals. Hydrogen's a gas, but it's still a metal. It causes the cheap oil to hydrogenate and turns a solid called and it's like Crisco shortening. So we turn to Crisco internally in our arteries. So if you can do chelation, that's a great thing if you're dealing with circulatory stuff. So I originally made it for circulation, but when I would ask people while they were taking it, they're saying, well, I don't have a problem with circulation. It's really more toxicity. I'm like, oh, that's great for the metals. And then some people would say, yeah, I've got chemical toxins. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't work with chemicals. That only works with metals. Oh,
Mm.
let me see what I can do with chemicals. Now, there's a process in the body. Here's a simple way to think about it.
Mm.
If a toxin is water soluble, you're just going to pee it out. That doesn't mean it won't cause some damage on the way out, right? But the damage you can heal and then it's gone. It's when a toxin is fat soluble, that's when you have trouble. Like I said about those misfolded proteins, a fat soluble toxin gets stuck in the body somewhere, and then you can't get it out, and it keeps causing problems. So the goal of detox, from my perspective at this vantage point, is you want to turn a fat soluble toxin water soluble, and then you can pee it out.
Mm.
Now, now think of a dish with some grease on it. If you
Okay.
dunk it in water, the grease won't come off. But if you dunk it in soapy water, it will come off. The soap is that compound which will turn the grease water soluble. So what detox really is we're looking for soaps that we can take in us, that won't hurt us, that will make whatever fat soluble toxin we have water soluble so we can pee it out.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
right, so chelation is making metals water soluble so you can pee them out. With chemicals, it's a bit more complex because there's a lot of different classes of chemicals. So there's something called phase 1 and phase 2 detox, and it's a little technical here. In phase 1 detox, the body unmasks or attaches a little grappling hook to the chemical toxin. In phase 2, it grabs the grappling hook, and phase 3, it goes out, leaves the body. It's now released. Have you ever heard of a coffee enema?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, a weird thing to do. When
Yep.
you take coffee rectally, it has a different effect than when you take it orally, and it triggers phase 1. It triggers that grappling hook phenomenon. Now, have you ever heard of someone who has multiple
Wait,
chemical? Go ahead.
wait. You guys don't be doing like some weird coffee enemas, okay? I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
saying.
Sorry, it's that the body works the way it works. I'm trying. I got to work with what I'm given.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay,
Sorry.
that's a disclaimer, guys. Go. Okay, go ahead.
I make as many of my products oral as possible. Trust me.
There you go. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do. Okay, so
Okay, go ahead.
have you ever heard of some of multiple chemical sensitivities?
Okay, no, I haven't.
So multiple chemical sensitivities is the person who, when they're in the elevator and someone walks in with cologne, they get sick as a dog,
Okay,
and
yeah.
they're sick for hours.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens with these poor folk is they can do phase 1, right? So you're in the elevator with your friend, someone else comes in with the cologne, and suddenly your friend is like, oh my God, I gotta get off the elevator. The cologne's getting me sick. You're not
Mm-hmm.
getting sick. You might think the cologne's a bit overpowered, maybe not your favorite brand, but you're not sick, but she
Mm-hmm.
is, right? So what's going on is her grappling hooks are grabbing on, are getting put on to the cologne that's now floating through her bloodstream. But she doesn't have the second part. She doesn't have the things to grab onto the grappling hooks. That would be glutathione, glutaric acid. They're called conjugating agents, right? And now with the grappling hooks, these toxins are actually more toxic. The grappling hook now allows it to grab onto other places and cause more problems. So during the process of our detox, there's this one moment where the toxin's actually made worse, and then it becomes inert, right? But she's not going to the next phase. And so she's getting sick from her
Mm.
body trying to get rid of the toxins. And we're seeing more and more people like this. So the Zenaplex product you saw on the website for chemical detox, I said, okay, I don't want to do a coffee enema, but I have to trigger the first phase, but I don't want to leave them hanging in case they don't have enough of these other elements to finish the job. So that product puts the organic coffee and then all the phase 2 elements in there, and we get, I'm really happy with how we're able to work with the chemically sensitive people. And normally what happens is, if someone's chemically sensitive, I'll say, look, you're probably going to feel pretty bad the first time you take this, and you stay with it. And the next day, you're probably going to feel pretty bad, but not as bad, maybe only 80% as bad. And stay with it. And each day, a less and less and less. And by the time a week or two is gone, you should not be reacting to it at all. And if you're not reacting to that, you're probably not going to be reacting to the cigarette smoke or cologne or whatever it is that's setting you off. And so that was that one. Now you asked about, and so those are like the two main general detoxifiers, you know, for the stuff, you know, you go get your hair colored or whatever, and all these things going through the skin. Anyhow, you asked about the liver gallbladder flush. So
Right.
that's another old school protocol, right? The three old school protocols I wanted to make easier for people was the chelation IV, the coffee enema, which it certainly is easier as a suppository than laying on your back in a bathtub with a quart of coffee up your backside.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people that, you know, they're dying of cancer, and this is
Yeah,
the protocol that they have to do, right?
yeah, this is
Yeah,
crazy. I had
yeah,
no idea.
yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. And then so the other thing is something called the liver gallbladder flush that I wanted to make an easier version of. Now, as you said, a lot of people have, if you ever look in the gallbladder of people with if you ever look in the gallbladder with ultrasound, you're going to see in a percentage of people stones and sludge, especially, you know, it tends to be more prevalent among women over 40 if they're a little heavier set, but anybody can get them. And so basically it's the body secretes bile through and from the liver, it goes into this little bag called the gallbladder. And then when you eat oily foods, the gallbladder squeezes the bile in, and that's the soap, right, to emulsify the fat so you can absorb them. It also helps with peristalsis and kills parasites. It does a lot of things. And then 95% of it we recycle back up at the bottom end of the small intestine so we can keep reusing it. It's a great system. But when someone has gallstones or sludge, which is like just before gallstones, it gets kind of sludgy. Now that bile can't get in there. So now they're not digesting fat. They're not digesting well at all. Their gut's out of whack. Maybe it clogs up some of the ducts and the pancreas bile starts shooting into the pancreas and gives them pancreatitis. I'm not going to say it's a design flaw, because if we lived healthy, natural lives, we'd have perfect gallbladders. But it's something that happens because of modern diet and such, and some of the other things. If you are around a lot of chlorinated water, that screws up the bile too. In any case, there's something called the liver gallbladder flush. And what that is someone will first drink a lot of apple cider vinegar to soften the gallstones, because the malic acid in apple cider will soften them up. And then they drink like half a cup of olive oil mixed with Epsom salt. And yes, it's about as disgusting as it sounds. Now, the idea behind that is the Epsom salt, it's magnesium, it's a muscle relaxant, and it relaxes the sphincter of Oddi, this little ring muscle at the bottom of the gallbladder, to make it open really wide. And then the olive oil triggers the gallbladder to dump very aggressively, because the body thinks, wow, I'm getting all this oil, I'm going to need a lot of bile. And so the liver gallbladder flush is an attempt to kind of heroically give birth to these stones. Yeah, you can do it. Once in a while, someone's going to get hurt because the stone will actually get stuck in the gallbladder duct. And of the three painful experiences in life, theoretically the most painful, childbirth number 3, kidney stones number 2, trapped gallstone is considered the worst thing you can get. So I thought, well, is there another way to do this without having to, what's that?
Please, another way, please.
Yes, right. Well, there's also another challenge, because people will, if you do this, most people will get out stones, right? Occasionally some people get hurt, but most people are going to pass a bunch of stones, which is cool. And the instructions on the cleanse are keep doing it until you no longer pass stones. Well, the problem is, at a certain point in time, there are no stones, but if you keep doing it, the olive oil interacts with the bile and makes false stones. It makes these little green pebbles. If you grab them, you can squeeze them in your finger. They're not gallstones, but people think they are. And so they keep doing this cleanse over and over and over. And remember how I said you have to reabsorb 95%? Well, you can't reabsorb 95% when that much comes out. So these people end up getting really dry in their liver. They just ran out of bile. Well, a dry liver creates gallstones. So here's a detox trap. And there's, I'd like, where the protocol you do creates the problem you're trying to treat. So anyway, we made a product with and so with ingredients in it, and the ingredients were used historically to melt gallstones. Now we make it as a suppository. And now you're saying, well, really, more suppositories? Yes, you can take it orally. There's nothing in there that would get destroyed in the digestive tract. In this case, the reason we're taking it as a suppository is because 30% of the blood flow to the liver is right at the bottom of the colon. So you've heard of, you know what a hemorrhoid is, right? That's when a
Yeah.
blood vessel. So if the liver gets really backed up, it can blow out the blood vessels that are in the rectum, and that's a hemorrhoid. But in
Right.
a healthy person, those blood vessels are still there. They're just not blown out. And if you put a suppository right next to them, whatever is in the suppository goes right to the liver. So in
Mhm.
this case, the idea of a suppository is not we have ingredients that don't survive digestion. It's the location is right where we're trying to go. And
Mhm.
so I tell people, look, you're not going to necessarily pass a bunch of stones the first day you do this. But by day 10, you should be pleased with the results. And you are not going to be drinking half a cup of olive oil and going through this really dramatic expulsion process that actually can cause problems. So that's what that product is.
Wow. You have a lot more. We don't even have time to talk about it, but I mean, you have so many different products up there. And then you also have a consultation. The
Mhm.
consultation, I think, would be great because people need to know what they need to take. And there might be a series of things they need to take in a certain order, like you said, that, they don't hurt themselves. So, my gosh.
Well, a basic detox, is just metals, chemicals, and then liver and kidneys and gallstones, kidney stones, which is the one we just talked about. We talked about
Right.
vitamins because, right, we want to get rid of the metals. We want to make the metals water soluble so you can pee those out. We
Hmm.
want to get rid of the chemicals, and we want to make those water soluble so you can pee those out. But in order to get rid of them, your kidneys have to be moving properly. And some of it still is going to be coming through the bile. So you want to make sure that there's no stones and sludge in the gallbladder, and that the kidney is operating at 100%. So that's why flushing out the gallbladder, and although I didn't mention it, the herb that breaks down gallstones also breaks down kidney stones. Flushing out the liver and the kidney allows those toxins to leave more quickly. So it's sort of like we're going back to the greasy dish, right? So now you've got a greasy dish and you've got your sink full of soapy water. Okay, great. But as you're rinsing all these things off, you want to make sure that your sink's not clogged. You want to
Hmm.
make sure that all that stuff goes out the bottom of the sink and leaves, because otherwise you've got all this soluble greasy mess in your sink and it just sits there. And that's
Right.
good for your dishes, but now the problem is in another part of your kitchen. So, right. So
Yeah.
that's how that works.
Wow, that is amazing. I am so excited to have had you on the show. This has been just amazing to me. I love stuff like this because I know that the natural way of getting rid of these things is so much better than everything else. Especially since if you could detox your body, then your body becomes sensitive to what you're really trying to do, which is get it healthy and
Mm.
stay healthy.
The
And
body
yeah.
has an amazing ability to repair itself. Yeah, yeah. God gave us such a fantastic uh, gift of the human body that even with all the toxins we're given, and even with all of the side effects of the drugs that some doctors, give us well-meaningly, we're still able to function, right? So if you give your body just a little bit of help, get it detoxed, fix the microbiome, balance some of the things that are out of whack, deal with some of the chronic infections. It doesn't take much. You take one step towards health, your body will take 9 steps towards you.
Mm, I love it. Where can people find you?
So our website is Remedylink, REMEDYLINK.com. And you can call us up, if you like, we can do a consult. And, just if you're listening to this and you've had something and you've been sick for a long time, your answer's out there somewhere, right? I don't believe that there's any condition that God didn't give a cure for if we're patient enough, have enough faith to keep looking for it. So, God bless you, and I wish the greatest of health to you and all of your listeners.
Oh, thank you so much. And I do too. We're going to go ahead and have that information in the description box below. So it'll be easy for you and me to go there and start doing what we need to do, which is detox our bodies and get our bodies online so that we can literally become healthier and live a greater quality of life and listen to the chickens as they chirp in the background, which is what I love. I absolutely love it. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't forget to dare to be different, and don't forget to be healthy today. I am telling you. Until next time, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow. Thank you so much for stopping by. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you'll be notified the next time that I upload. And don't forget to dare to be different. Until next time, guys.
I dare to be different. I dare to be different. I dare to be